last part today. Have you thought about what you think might happen at the end? So I told you at the very beginning that it's got a happy ending, didn't I? And I know there are some sad bits in it because it was a sad time, and it's important really to learn about these things, I think. But something happens at the end that's really happy. Have a think about what you think it might be. We'll get started. Thursday, October the 5th, 1944. My birthday, and we've moved back home. Remember, this was the part where Bowie said that she was just going to give 2 more entries to a bit later on, yeah? It should have been the best birthday present I ever had. I was longing for today, and now it's come, and I should be happy. But I'm not. This house isn't my home. It's an empty shell stacked with furniture, tea chests everywhere, and it's damp. When we arrived, the front door was hanging off its hinges, so anyone could have been in and out, and by the look of it, they have been too. It's a real mess. There's black mould on the ceiling, green in some places, and there are dead birds and leaves everywhere. The wallpaper's falling off above the chimney in the sitting room, and half a dozen of the windows are broken. The rain's come in and rotted the windowsill in my bedroom. The ceiling in Grandfather's room has come down in one corner. There's a hole in the roof where the slates have been blasted away by some shell. The gutters are full of grass, and one drain pipe has fallen down into the garden and smashed the greenhouse. Not that you can call it a garden, not anymore. You can hardly see a flower. Grass has grown up everywhere. You can't even see where the flower beds in the vegetable garden were. The granary must have taken a direct hit from a shell because there's nothing left of it but rubble. Barry and me went off for a walk around the farm. There's nettles and docks head high wherever you look. But the worst of it is that it's all so quiet. Only Grandfather seems truly happy to be home. Never you mind, Grandfather said this evening as we sat around the table in the kitchen in gloomy silence. Once we bring the animals back tomorrow, the place will come alive. You'll see. We'll soon put it all right. Spick and span in no time. It's Miss Colbert ringing me. I'll ring her back in a minute. Few hens about the place, and they'll cackle loud enough to drive out any quiet. I hope he's right. At least I'm back in my own room, even if it doesn't feel like it yet. All I've got so far is my bed, my chair, and my lamp. My room smells. The whole house smells. P.S. I can't believe this. I just finished writing my diary and was reaching out to blow out the lamp when I noticed some writing on the wall by the window in pencil. This is what it says. January the 10th, 1944. Harry and Adi were here looking for tips. Welcome home, Lily. I just keep reading it over and over again. I can't stop crying, and I don't know whether it's because I'm happy or sad. Both. I'm not going to tell anyone about this, not tonight. It was written to me, so tonight I'm going to keep it to myself. I'll tell the others in the morning. I have to look at it again and again to believe it's real. Friday, October the 6th. Supreme. I feel supreme all over because just about the best thing that could happen has happened. And it happened at breakfast time. I wondered where I was when I first woke up this morning. The window was in the wrong place. I was lying in bed trying to work it all out when I saw the writing on the wall. Then I remembered everything. I was home. I jumped out of bed and called everyone to my room to show them the message Adi and Harry had left. Of course, I told them as if I'd only just discovered it. Grandfather wasn't there. He'd already gone up to Uncle George's to milk the cows. All we talked about at breakfast was the writing on the wall, but we were in a hurry because Mum said we had to be up at Uncle George's quick as we could. Lickety-split, she said, to help fetch home the cows after milking. Anyway, we were washing the dishes when the back door opened. All by itself, it seemed, and in she came, meowing and purring all at the same time, wandering under the table in amongst the chair legs, tail quivering with pleasure. Tips alive. Tips back from the dead. We were all crying, Barry too, and he doesn't even like cats. I put down some milk for her and she lapped it till she'd licked the bowl clean. She's a lot thinner than she was, and there's a scratch on her face which wasn't there before, but she's definitely Tips, my Tips. Green eyes, white paws, and all her black patches in the right place. And she purrs the same too, and there's a very cute picture of her. Ah, look at that. Looks a bit like my cat, actually. Mum and I didn't have to go with them to fetch the animals home, but she and Grandfather and Barry could manage without me. So all I've done today is cuddle Tips. I've played with her, fed her, and cuddled her again. I think I gave her 10 months' worth of cuddles in one day. She's come home just like Adie said she would. I've looked back in my diary to be sure. These are his exact words. She'll come home. That cat's a real survivor, sure as my name is Adolphus T. Madison. So I've decided that from now on she's always going to be called Adolphus Tips. I asked her first, of course, and she purred, so I know she's happy about it. Mind you, she's been purring non-stop ever since she came home. I think she's happy because she's got an important-sounding name and she likes to feel important. I keep saying it to get myself used to it, getting her used to it. Adolphus Tips, Adolphus Tips. Makes me smile every time I say it out loud because it sounds so funny and because every time I say it I think of Adie. Just now I touched the writing on the wall before I turned down the lamp. I'm going to do that every night to bring him luck over in France, and I'm going to pray for him too. Then maybe he'll come back like Tips has, like Adolphus Tips has. And now, Booey, over 60 years later, here's the beginning of the end of the story. Adie didn't come back. But there's hardly been a day since I haven't thought about him, and about Adolphus Tips too. She was already quite an old cat by the time we found one another again, and she aged quickly after her miraculous return. I think that her struggle for survival on her own must have taken a lot out of her, and giving birth to all those kittens too. She died peacefully 3 years later, and I buried her in the garden. Gradually the people moved back into the cottages and farms all around us. As you can imagine, there had been a lot of destruction. Hardly a single building had survived unscathed, and many were in ruins. The farms and farmyards were infested with weeds and rats, and there were rabbits everywhere, thousands of them. We ate a lot of rabbit stew. For a while it was a sad place to be, but bit by bit things improved. The houses were repaired, the farms tidied up, the church had been hit too, one of the walls blown out, so we couldn't use it for a while. I remember the first time the bells rang again. It was to celebrate the end of war in 1945. That was the year Dad came home, and the year the village school opened again, and it was the year we got our generator too. Dad had worked a lot on generators in the army, so he installed it himself. We were one of the first houses in the village to have our own electricity. Dad was always very proud of that. Later on, generators became his business. He took over one of the barns as his workshop, and he supplied generators all over the country, all over the world. Mum and Grandfather and I went on running the farm together, and we were quite happy to be doing it. After the war was over, Barry went back home to London, back to his mother. He wrote to me for a while, but then we lost touch. One of us didn't reply. I don't remember which. He came back to see us, though, several years afterwards. He had his new wife with him and wanted her to meet us, and to show her the farm, I suppose. I remember I was even a little jealous. He still smiled the same, was still very sweet and kind. He told us over tea that his stay with us during the war had been the happiest time of his childhood. He's living out in Australia now, near a place called Armandale in New South Wales. He became a sheep farmer. After his time with us down on the farm, he never wanted to be anything other than a farmer. We exchanged photographs of grandchildren at Christmas. I hope to go and visit him one day. We'll see. As you know, Booey, Mrs. Blumfield never went back to Holland after the war, but stayed on in our village as the school teacher. You came with me to see her once or twice, do you remember? She's in the graveyard now, not far from Grandfather and Uncle George, and Mum and Dad too, and now your Grandpa as well. I keep all their graves as tidy as I can, and I often put flowers there too, snowdrops, primroses, bluebells, daffodils, fuchsia, whatever's in season, whatever I can find in the garden. Sometimes we've done it together, Booey, haven't we? Now to the end of my story. It was about 3 years ago. You'd just gone back home, I remember, after spending your holidays with Grandpa and me. I was going for my usual walk along the beach, past the place where the old hotel had once been, when I saw a couple of men standing at the water's edge looking out to sea. I remember thinking it was strange, because they looked a little out of place, not dressed for the beach at all. As you know, you can hear someone coming on those pebbles from a long way away. They must have heard me, because they turned round to look at me at the same time. Both of them were very tall, and both were black. One looked much older than the other. He had white hair and was carrying a bunch of flowers. Maybe this was something I'd always believed would happen, because I knew who it was the moment I set eyes on him. It wasn't only my eyes that told me, it was my heart too. But he didn't recognize me. They turned away, and as I watched, both of them began scattering the flowers into the sea, throwing them as far out as they could, which wasn't very far, so they soon floated in again on the waves and washed up on the beach. I knew the flowers were for Harry. I waited a while before I approached them, not wishing to disturb the moment. "Adie," I said. He turned and looked at me. It was him. It really was him. "Adolphus T. Madison," I went on. "That's T for Thomas. Private, first class, U.S. Army." Then he smiled the smile I remembered. "Lily," he said, and we took each other's hands, unable to say another word. So Adie and his son, he's called him Harry, came back to the bungalow and had tea with your grandpa and me. In between the scones and macaroons, Adie and I told one another the stories of our lives. There was a fair bit to catch up on, as you can imagine. We had a wonderful time together that day. Your grandpa took to Adie at once because Adie talked to him as if he wasn't in a wheelchair and as if he wasn't ill, and he always liked that, as you know. It was whilst we were talking that Harry told me that Adie had been wanting to make this trip all his life, to remember his old friend Harry and to visit the farm again where Lily, the little girl with the cat, lived, and where they'd been made to feel so welcome. Harry had grown up with the story all his life. Adie's wife had died a year or so before, and he didn't want to leave it any longer. So we decided we'd just pack our bags and come right over, Adie said. "Say, do you remember that day we came visiting with the hot dogs?" We laughed out loud then as we recalled the great hot dog feast and Barry's face covered in ketchup from ear to ear. I told him that Tips had come back home in the end, just like he said he would, and that I'd renamed her Adolphus Tips. She said that it made him feel real proud to hear that. They drove away after tea was over and went to see the farm on their way back to London. I should have liked to have gone with them, of course, but your grandpa would have been upset if I'd left him alone again so soon after my daily walk. But Adie and I wrote to one another after that, often. He sent flowers for your grandpa's funeral, and then wrote to me afterwards saying that if I'd ever like to visit them in Atlanta, I'd be more than welcome. So I went, Bowie, and that's where I am now, in Atlanta, in America. I don't think the two of us have stopped talking since the day I arrived. We have a lot of time to make up. And so when Adie asked me a week ago now, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world to say yes. What do you think she said yes to? We got married last Tuesday. Second time around, and I've married my childhood sweetheart. The church was full to bursting, and you have never heard such wonderful singing in all your life. They sing with such joy over here, as if they really mean every word, every note. So now I'm Mrs. Madison, and as soon as the honeymoon's over, I'm bringing him home to live with me in Slapton. We'll be having our honeymoon in New York. Neither of us have ever been there. And then we'll be flying back to London next Saturday evening. We arrive at Heathrow, Terminal 4, at 7:30. I'm longing for you to meet him, Bowie. You'll like him, I know you will. I hope everyone else does too. Be there if you can. And I was there, of course. We all were. Uncles and aunties, the whole family. Some of them were still upset by the surprise of it all, but everyone was curious, most of all me. So we were all waiting for them at Heathrow, ready with confetti. That was my idea, as they came out of customs. She looked so small beside him. They were holding hands and smiling like two cats who had got the cream and were blissfully happy to be sharing it. It was a really lovely picture. There you go. And then I was shaking Adie's hand. "Hi there," he said, beaming down at me from a great height. "I reckon you've got to be Bowie. Yep, you're just like someone I used to know a long, long time ago, except you're a boy, of course, and you ain't got no pigtails." After a while, Grandma led me away, her arm round my shoulder. "What do you think, Bowie?" she whispered. "Supreme," I said. "Just supreme." So it was a really happy ending, wasn't it? Hope you enjoyed that.